An online travel entrepreneur who put metasearch on the map, our next speaker helped found Orbitz, co-founded KAYAK, and is now taking the reins at the largest online platform for restaurant reservations. Please welcome KAYAK co-founder and CEO, Steve Hafner. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
You've been doing this for what, how many years?
A long time.
Getting sick of it?
No, you guys keep it lively, it's fun.
Okay, all right, well, we'll see what we can do. So, 2012, so you sold to a small company in the travel industry. If I had asked you in 2012, would you still be the CEO of KAYAK 6 years later, what would you have said?
I would have hoped by now they would have found someone better. But no, look, we got a lot of unfinished business at KAYAK, and I've been delighted to keep leading it.
There's been a lot of talk about metasearch and kind of the future. It's been a somewhat hot topic. So there's actually an article that was on Phocuswright a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, did you read this one?
I did.
So, so you've had a good run.
I don't think metasearch is dead by any stretch of the imagination. I also don't think it's a winner-take-all category, despite what Richard didn't say.
So let's talk about the two big public companies in metasearch, some pretty interesting results, a very similar trend for their Q3 earnings. So can you walk us through what's going on? I mean, there's two key metrics, right, we can all see. There's one metric that's going one way, the other metric is going the other way. Can you walk us through what's going on? What's your take on TripAdvisor and Trivago and why that's happening?
Yeah, well, I think it's all about the pace of how you drive your company's growth. And at KAYAK, we've always been big believers that sustainable, profitable growth is the best course over the long term. And some of our competitors were just a little bit more aggressive. So if you look at Trivago, for example, this quarter they cut marketing 25% year over year, and the revenue fell 12%. But as a result, they made money. And I would argue that they've been over-investing in marketing for quite some time. And certainly their last quarter results showed that. At TripAdvisor, it's a slightly different story. They pulled back a little bit on marketing, and they saw their traffic quality improve and their revenue per hotel shopper improve.
So what about with KAYAK? So have you been through this period? Have you been growing? What can you share from the KAYAK
Unfortunately,
story?
I can't share anything about KAYAK with you because we're just a small subsidiary of Booking Holdings. But feel free to ask Glenn, who I guess I'm the opening act for, because he's going to be up here in a bit.
Well, let's talk about Google then. So all of the things that you say Richard didn't say. So Google's been growing quite a bit. So there's some research that we've done. So Google Flights seems to be really gaining some ground on KAYAK. Hotels, they're doing a lot there. So they make you nervous? What's going on?
Well, we started the company in 2004, and Google still existed back then, right? So we always knew we were going to compete with them. And what we've done over the last 14 years is stay a couple steps ahead. And that strategy hasn't changed. And then we've invested very heavily in marketing so that consumers, when they're thinking about travel, go to KAYAK directly and bypass Google. But to their credit, Google's slow, but when they finally get their act together, they can make a big difference. And our company hasn't suffered as a result of Google's growth. But I still scratch my head and wonder, why do people go to OTAs or suppliers directly without using a metasearch channel first? And a lot of people still do that. So I think that's where we intend to grow share.
Why do you think? Why do people do that?
Because people are I guess I shouldn't make too big a generalization. Does anyone in this room still go directly to an OTA? If you do, I hope it's Booking. But the reality is people are lazy and they're habitual. So if you're content with the search results you're getting from Expedia, you just go to Expedia, when in fact you should go to Google or Skyscanner or KAYAK and get a better picture of your travel options. So
from a global perspective, so in the US, it's a pretty relevant question. There's really only two major OTAs, price parity, lots of consolidation on the hotel side. So very often, so I will say I do frequently use metasearch, and it's amazing how little variation there is, right? So in the US market, is there really how much opportunity is there? Like, why do people even go to metasearch, quite frankly? You could really flip that around.
You still need to do price comparison, and the airlines are making it more difficult to do that. So if you go to supplier direct, you're not going to get a complete picture of what's available, and you may have a very hard time comparing what basic economy on American Airlines is versus basic economy on United. So I think metasearch still serves the intent of showing prices and selection, but we're also able now to show you differences on whether you're traveling with a bag or if you want advanced seat selection, et cetera. So fair family. So there's a lot of stuff still going on in metasearch that's quite innovative. And it's easier for KAYAK to do that than it is for, say, Expedia.
So then what are some of those big things that we could see coming over the next few years? So if we were to look out, I don't know, 3 to 4 years in terms of what the metasearch landscape looks like what are those innovations? How different is it going to be?
Well, I think there will be fewer and fewer players, for sure, because it's consolidating, it's a global game. And I think we've consistently shown over the years that we're going to be one of the winners, right? But I think on the product stuff, the core search is still, that problem hasn't been solved yet. We don't have every airline, every accommodation option. We don't do a particularly good job when you're ready to book. And then while you're in travel mode, we don't do a particularly good job helping you with that. So I never want KAYAK to be in the customer service business, but I do want our tech to actually help you while you're on the road.
So you've made some significant acquisitions, right? So Momondo in Europe, hotels combined. That hasn't closed yet, I think, right? Or is it?
Any day.
Okay. So what are your plans? I actually remember, I think it was 2 years ago, or maybe it was 4 years ago, you're sitting on this stage, and it was you, Skyscanner, maybe Trivago, and we asked, say, who's making money in Asia? And you did not raise your hand. So is that going to
We're not losing money in Asia, which is a step in the right direction, right? So look, Asia is a challenging market for a lot of Western companies. I wouldn't say that we're in Asia in any material way now. Hotels Combined is a great brand for those of you who know it, based in Sydney. But that does, and the acquisition makes a tremendous amount of industrial logic for us, but it doesn't get us into China.
Are you going to keep the brand?
Pardon me?
Are you going to keep the brand, Hotels Combined, or are you going?
Yeah, they will be our 7th travel brand. So KAYAK actually operates 6 different meta brands, and we also have OpenTable now, and then Hotels Combined will be actually our 7th travel brand, but 8th brand overall.
So you said you're still not in China, so any plans?
Well, I should say that we have a website in China. We just don't have any users.
There are lots of people in China, I've been told.
There are. It's a conundrum, right? But we'll figure it out. We'll probably be in partnership with local Chinese players. And I'll tip my hat to Glenn Fogel, my boss. Booking Holdings has done a really good job at forging partnership with domestic Chinese companies, and that's probably the right way to go.
Well, so since we're on the topic of China, Ctrip. Booking is invested quite significantly in Ctrip. Ctrip acquired an interesting metasearch company.
They did. They overpaid for it, but they bought it.
Little remorse there, or?
No. But no, look, I think it makes a lot of sense for an OTA or a group of OTAs to own a metasearch company or two, because consumers are different. Some prefer going OTA directly, some prefer using the metasearch experience. I tend to think over time, meta and OTA models may merge a little bit more than they have. But no, Skyscanner is a great team, great asset. We looked at it too, honestly.
Do you think Ctrip could be a threat, globally in the global market for Booking and Expedia?
I can't think offhand of any Chinese domiciled company that's really had great inroads in the Western world. And by the flip side, the same is true for Western companies going to China. So I think, I like their aspirations, because to sustain their valuation, you've got to get out of China. I don't know, how successful they've been to date. But they have a really smart team, so we'll see.
Booking on metasearch. So KAYAK was actually one of the first, if I recall, way back with, it was actually Air Canada. But you've always been kind of, tepid around it. You've not really talked about it that much. And some other competitors, of course, TripAdvisor, Google is now really stepping into this. So why have you kind of been soft about it, kind of pulled back a bit? And why is Google going forward, Skyscanner? Like What do you know that they don't, or what do they know that you don't?
Well, I think they'll all be smarter about it a couple of months after they launch it. But does anyone in here actually use this book on kayak feature? Just a show of hands. Yeah. So that's what we know, which is most people will use kayak to search, and then when they're ready to book, they'll go somewhere else. And we're fine with that. The reason we debuted a book on kayak was at the time, especially in our app environment, if we dropped you off on JetBlue, JetBlue's site experience is so crappy you couldn't buy.
Douglas,
Yeah, that's
a
changed.
question for the audience.
Hi, it's Joseph from ChinaTravelNews.com. So Steve, what's your comments on, is it easier for Ctrip to go globally, or is it easier for Booking Holdings to go localized in China?
Well, that's a tough one. I think it's easier for Booking to localize and go to China than it is for us, if that's where you're going with that. I think there are a number of Chinese players who could profit from linking up with Kayak, and we're in conversations with a few of them. That's how we'll enter that market.
Another question from the audience.
Steve, it's Philip. What's the question I should have asked Richard that I did not?
Philip, you know this. Any question you ask Google, you're not going to get a right answer or a straight answer out of them. So it doesn't really matter what you ask. Richard's a lovely guy, but every person Google ever brings up on stage here is taught two things. Be humble, so you're not threatening anybody, and then don't say anything. Thank you.
If you could get an answer, what question would you ask?
My biggest fear out of Google is, well, two fears. One, when are they going to start stealing my traffic, my brand traffic? So we get a lot of people who type in kayak, and I'm sure people in the room get a lot of brand direct intent from Google. There's nothing stopping them from putting their search box as the first link after someone types in kayak on Google, other than fear of regulatory oversight.
Do you think the regulatory bodies will step in? Do you think that's...
Look, I think Google's certainly acting with a lot more trepidation in Europe than they used to. But regulators aren't out to protect Kayak or other online travel companies. They're actually out to make a buck. So I think the more likely course of action is to fine them. $5 billion here, $10 billion there.
Meta search categories in sort of other verticals, right? So meta search for vacation rentals, meta search for tours and activities. There's been kind of attempts, right, to kind of bring this model. It's kind of like the Kayak for, the Airbnb for.
Yeah, I read one for recovery, addiction recovery now.
Oh, really?
Meta search site for that.
Have you tried it, or?
I haven't. I'm still a drinker. I think meta search for activities and for non-hotel accommodations is still early days, and I'm not sure that those categories are mature enough yet to substantiate a healthy meta competitor. And certainly, a lot of the non-hotel accommodation metas are suffering as a result.
But Douglas, one more question.
One of the names that we haven't heard here is Amazon. They've been making inroads slowly but surely. My question to you is, what do you think is their impact's going to be when they wake up?
I wouldn't say they're asleep. They're just working on other cool stuff. I've always thought that Amazon should buy Booking Holdings. They have a great audience. They've got payment information. Travel is by far the biggest category of e-commerce. Doesn't require warehouses or anything like that, and Amazon should just buy Booking and get it done with. The challenge for them is that's going to cost them $130 billion. So, we'll see what happens, but historically everything Amazon's tried to do in the travel category has failed. And I don't think that's because they're not in a good position. I think it's because they put the JV on it.
You were one of the first brands to do an Alexa skill. How's that working out?
Does anybody in this room use Alexa to look for travel information, or do flight status or hotel bookings?
You mean like regularly?
I don't think so. We did it because it's fun. Our engineers love doing that stuff, and we've done a lot of innovative skills for Alexa. But I don't envision a world where you say, hey, Google or Alexa, ask Kayak to do this, right? I think what's really going to turn into is just Alexa, do this. And travel is probably going to be one of the last categories that actually becomes a use case that is frequent for people. Because it's a pain in the ass to say passenger names and birth dates and all that kind of stuff.
So, but everyone has been talking about this idea of this is the next kind of browser, right? Voice is the next browser, and Google's going to own it, and Amazon's going to own it. So, is that a risk, or is that too far out?
It's not a risk because I don't think those companies are going to own it as an e-commerce pipe. I think it's actually an opportunity for our sister brands at Booking, for example, who have huge customer service infrastructure. If we can take voice and turn that into chat, then we make it a lot more efficient for a customer service rep to handle multiple people at the same time. And that's where I think the opportunity is.
So do you want to get back to the vacation rental thing and that market? Because you said it was, the markets are not mature enough, but actually the markets are quite fragmented on the one hand on the supply side. So you think there'd be a real opportunity for aggregation. On the flip side, you've got like three and a half players in the market, right, with Airbnb, Booking, and HomeAway. So it's somewhat consolidated. You've dipped your toes into it. Brian Sharples was on your board right before the acquisition.
Yeah, great guy. Look, the reason I say it's immature is because it's not a product issue. You can search all this stuff, and it is fragmented. It's a monetization issue. Will Airbnb and Booking and others pay you for those leads at volume, enough volume that you can actually make a good living? And right now, I'd say it's pretty meager.
What about Airbnb? They're going to go public next year?
I hope so. If I was Brian Chesky, I'd try to draft right behind Dara at Uber.
What about Airbnb experiences? What's your take on that?
Non-event. I think it's great for their brand imagery, but I don't think it's doing anything for the P&L. But we'll know when they publish their 10K, well not 10K, but their S1.
But with all this talk about an IPO next year, but also Airbnb growth seems to be slowing. There's some reports out. Like, any advice for them? Like, you've been through this process.
It's tough to go from a 100% plus growth company to a 25% year-on-year growth company because you usually staff up and build your overhead and your people and your systems ahead of the growth curve. Yeah. So I think they're having a big adjustment with that. And the other part of Airbnb is, there is a backlash when you push forward on stuff that regulators aren't ready for. And Uber saw that backlash. Airbnb is seeing that backlash. So it's always been the mission of Booking.com and the Booking Holdings to comply with what regulators like.
So I think
that's the right strategy.
So how would you, if you were the CEO of Airbnb, what would you do?
I'd get a really nice house. Maybe a few of them actually.
Don't you already have one?
No, I'm still working, right? I'm still working. Look, I think Brian's doing a lot of good stuff, and he has done great stuff for the industry. I think he needs to figure out how to combine traditional accommodations and non-traditional hotels. And I think he also needs to address his pricing model because charging consumers booking fees I don't know how sustainable that's going to be long term.
Open table. So that's a new
challenge.
Yeah, new challenge. Right. So what's going on there? What are your plans?
I'm not changing too much about OpenTable, honestly. OpenTable is a great asset. How many people here use OpenTable? The answer is everybody. I wish that many people use KAYAK. It's a great company. It's a beloved brand. And most importantly, we have a really talented team there. So my job now overseeing it is I'm not the CEO of OpenTable, just the organization reports up through me. And it's just about trying to get them to move just a little bit faster on some key initiatives and take a little bit more risk. And then the last part is just eliminating any artificial barriers between sharing knowledge across our brands. So, the people who use OpenTable and the people who use KAYAK are the same. They're just different usage occasions. So we have the same challenges about customer acquisition. We have the same challenges about product development, et cetera.
But what were the challenges originally with OpenTable? Like, what are some of the? Was it a plan issue? Was it expanding internationally? Was it the team?
We paid an awful lot of money for OpenTable. More money than we paid for KAYAK, to my eternal regret. And we just weren't seeing the growth that we wanted, particularly internationally. But even here in the US, we hadn't changed our pricing model in 20 years. We're charging restaurants $1 per seat a diner for simplicity's sake, which doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. And that problem was well known, for example, at OpenTable, but they were being very what's a diplomatic way? Very analytical and methodical about testing how they're going to actually change that pricing model, which all makes a lot of sense. But at some point in time, you just need to make a decision and put it out in the wild, and that's what we're going to do.
What's the connection or a link, or is there any, between, say, OpenTable and KAYAK? I mean, actually, when I think about other businesses within the Booking family, like a two-sided marketplace with lots of small businesses on the supply side.
Every marketplace is two-sided, by the way. You don't have to
say that. Fair enough, but it's a very different kind of business.
Yes. So look, OpenTable and KAYAK are integrated by function now. So we have one marketing team that oversees the brand spend across all of our 7 brands, and we do that across media and across locales. We have one finance team. We have one product team. The one thing that OpenTable does quite differently than KAYAK is they have a big sales force, a field sales force and an inside sales force. So that reports directly to me. But everything else we've integrated by function. And the savings from doing that on overhead are significant, but more importantly, it speeds up decision making and best practice sharing.
So OpenTable also has a loyalty program.
Great one.
Yeah. So loyalty programs are somewhat popular in the travel industry, but the Booking family doesn't have a loyalty program. Jeff never liked the idea. Didn't like to pay his customers to come back to him. That's what he always said. Is there an application for that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we recently launched at 50% of our OpenTable users. So if you have OpenTable points and go to redeem them now, you can actually get $10 for 2,000 points on Amazon, or you can get $40 off a hotel reservation. So OpenTable has a loyalty point program that's one of the few I know that actually loses money. And instead, we're going to flip the script on that and actually use OpenTable loyalty points to drive hotel bookings. And you may well earn OpenTable points for using KAYAK in the future.
Okay. All right. So one of the things we've heard a lot from Glenn Fogel, from Gillian Tans, is this idea of a future kind of booking kind of travel experience, like a full-service type of agency. So I've had this expectation of flights and cars and all of this, and yet when I go to Booking.com and I click on the flights tab, all I see is a tab with a KAYAK thing. I guess I was expecting more.
Underwhelming, right? Underwhelming, but it's actually nicely profitable for us. So look, the mission of Booking Holdings is to help people experience the world. If we can do that with one anchor brand, Booking.com, and do it well, then I think being the platform for how consumers interact with travel experiences makes a ton of sense. But it's early days. Historically, we've all operated as independent brands, and we don't share much information about the consumers. We don't share much information about marketing, and that's changing. So the rental cars brand now reports up through Booking. OpenTable and KAYAK have gotten married, so we'll see what else happens.
But that's a really fundamental shift. I mean, like every year, right, Jeff and then Glenn would come up on stage and talk about kind of the power of the brands and the importance of leaving the original teams in place and letting them have their freedom and independence. And so now how do you break down that or change that culture?
I mean, when you have companies growing at 40% a year, right? You don't want to muck it up by integrating them. But when growth slows down and you get to global scale, you need to change your playbook, and that's what we're doing. I mean, you guys would find it goofy if you logged into Zappos and you couldn't use your Amazon account to do so.
Wait, sorry, hang on. We can't close this without doing a little game, right? So just 30 more seconds, okay? I've got a couple of rapid-fire questions.
Okay, fire away.
Okay. Company you most admire?
It's not a rapid-fire question. It's actually Google, unfortunately.
Founder you most admire?
Founder I most admire?
Yeah. Besides yourself?
I would say the head of Elon Musk, but he's had a rough year, really rough year.
So your heart goes out to him.
I still like him. I've made
Okay.
a lot of money shorting his stock.
Company you wish you founded?
I used to say it was Airbnb, but now I think it's Uber.
Most interesting travel startup idea over your career in travel?
Well, it's an interesting idea. I mean, for me, it was just the whole idea of apps. I never thought people would use travel, would choose an app over a travel desktop experience, and you know, I was wrong about that. I've said that before.
We'll let it slide.
Yeah.
Dumbest startup idea?
Dumbest startup idea. Wow, that's a tough one. There's a lot of competition for that. You know, I would say it's about taking over hotel floors in India, but you know, I was proven wrong about that.
Most overhyped trend?
Most overhyped trend? AI for sure.
Oh, most underhyped trend?
Most underhyped trend. I don't know. You know, there's so much hype in everything we do these days. I don't think anything is underhyped.
Acquisition you wish you made?
Chunar.
Acquisition you wish you didn't?
Does anyone know what Chunar is? Yeah. It's a metasearch site in China. Awesome. C-Trip owns them, unfortunately.
Acquisition you wish you didn't make?
I just wish I'd paid less for them. Let's put it that way.
All right, last question. So when you sold, your co-founder, Paul English, left the company and then went off and somebody wrote a book about him. So if somebody writes a book about Steve Hafner, what's the title of that book?
Gosh, that's a tough one. Hopefully it's not What a Jackass.
Ladies and gentlemen, the CEO
Thank
of
you.
KAYAK, Steve Hafner. Nice to meet you.